Hi, church family. I'm pretty sure over the course of these videos, I've said several verses that were my favorite verse. But if I really had to choose one passage from the Bible that I would say is my favorite, it would be from the book of Lamentations. It's Lamentations chapter 3, starting in verse 21. It says, "This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. The Lord's loving kindnesses indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I have hope in him." And the reason that I love this passage is that it doesn't really make sense for it to be here in the middle of this book of Lamentations. Lamentations was written by the prophet Jeremiah, who is known as the weeping prophet. Lamentations obviously comes from that word lament, or to weep, or mourn, or grieve. And when Jeremiah wrote this, the people of Israel were under captivity from Babylon. And Babylon had besieged Jerusalem, and the consequences of that siege were dire. People were dying in the streets. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible situation. And if you read the first part of Lamentations 3, you get to see Jeremiah's despair. He says things like, "I'm a man who has seen affliction because of the rod of his wrath. He has driven me and made me walk in darkness and not in light." And when he's talking about he and him in this first part of the chapter, he's referring to God. In verse 8, he says, "Even when I cry out and call for help, he shuts out my prayer." And so Jeremiah was in despair. He says that in verse 17 and 18. "My soul has been rejected from peace. I have forgotten happiness. So I say, my strength has perished, and so has my hope from the Lord." And I think what's so amazing about this passage in Lamentations 3 is that nothing in Jeremiah's circumstances change. What changes is his perspective. And instead of focusing on all of the circumstances around him, he chooses to focus on who God is. And so he says, "This I recall to my mind." I'm choosing to remember. And that's why I have hope. The Lord's loving kindnesses indeed never cease. His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. And during this time when, from talking to some of you, I know that there is a kind of underlying feeling of hopelessness. There's an underlying feeling of, will things ever get better? Will things ever return to what we think of as normal? I would encourage you, like Jeremiah, to recall to your mind the things that you know about God. His love, his compassion, his forgiveness, the fact that he is with us. Recall these things to your mind. That's what's going to give us hope. Focusing on the circumstances around us doesn't seem hopeful, but focusing on who God is and what he has done for us gives us hope in the midst of any situation. I'd also just like to suggest that if you are feeling particularly hopeless, if you are feeling like you can't even make that choice to focus on God, would you send me an email? Would you send somebody at church an email and just ask for prayer? I found that often in those situations when we ourselves are almost too down to look up, it helps to have someone come alongside. And I'd like to be that person. I know there are others at the church who would like to be that person for you. "This I recall to my mind. Therefore I have hope. The Lord." Let's focus on him today.